My name is Emily Carter, and I was 33 years old the week I realized that sometimes the people who claim to care about your children are the very people quietly judging them behind your back. My husband, Daniel, was 38, and we had been married for almost 10 years. Together, we were raising two wonderful children we adopted through foster care several years earlier after they had experienced a difficult start in life. Our son, Logan, was 8. Our daughter, Madison, was 6. They were thriving. Logan loved video games, science projects, and asking questions that somehow always required a 20-minute explanation. Madison was fearless, energetic, and convinced that glitter belonged on absolutely everything she owned. They were loud. They were messy. They argued over snacks, television remotes, and whose turn it was to sit by the window in the car. In other words, they were exactly what happy children should be. Watching them heal, grow, and become confident little people had been the greatest blessing of my life. I thought everyone in my family could see that. For a long time, my older sister, Rebecca, had been polite enough about our family. Not especially warm, but polite. Her husband, Jason, was another story. Jason always had opinions. Opinions about parenting. Opinions about relationships. Opinions about life in general. And somehow, those opinions always found their way into conversations where nobody had asked for them. Most of the time, I ignored him. Life was busy. The kids were doing well. My marriage was strong. I didn't need validation from someone who seemed determined to criticize everything. Then Madison's 6th birthday was approaching. We planned a small celebration. A few relatives. A few friends from school. Cake. Games. Presents. The kind of simple birthday that children remember because they spend the entire day laughing. A few days before the party, our family gathered for dinner at my parents' house. Everything seemed normal. People talked about work. My father complained about the economy. The children ran around the house making enough noise to shake the walls. Then Jason spoke. He was watching Logan and Madison play when he casually said something that immediately caught my attention. I've always wondered whether adopted children struggle later in life because they miss certain things growing up. The room became quiet. I looked at him. What exactly do you mean? He shrugged. I'm just saying that children need certain examples and influences while they're growing up. Daniel looked at him carefully. What kind of influences? Jason leaned back in his chair. A traditional family environment. A lot of adopted kids end up dealing with identity issues later because they don't have that foundation. I felt my stomach tighten. Not because I hadn't heard opinions like that before, but because he was talking about my children. Children who had worked incredibly hard to overcome challenges they never asked for. I calmly explained that Logan and Madison were doing exceptionally well. They were loved. They were secure. They were succeeding in school. They had support, stability, and a home where they were cherished every single day. Most people would have stopped there. Jason didn't. Instead, he doubled down. I'm just being honest, he said. There are usually long-term effects. Kids need certain things to develop properly. The room fell silent. That phrase stayed with me. Kids need certain things to develop properly. As though everything we had built together somehow wasn't enough. As though two happy children could be reduced to a theory. As though he knew more about my family than the people actually living in it. The dinner ended shortly afterward. But the comment didn't leave my mind. For days, I kept thinking about Madison's birthday party. About the atmosphere I wanted in my home. About whether someone who openly questioned my children's well-being should really be invited to celebrate one of them. Finally, I made a decision. I called Rebecca privately. I told her she was welcome to come. I genuinely wanted her there. But I wasn't comfortable inviting Jason anymore. The reaction was immediate. Rebecca accused me of being dramatic. She said I was punishing her because of her husband's opinion. She claimed I was creating unnecessary conflict. What I didn't realize at the time was that this simple boundary was about to divide my family in ways I never expected. Because over the next few days, people would start revealing exactly where they stood. And some of those answers would surprise me far more than Jason's comments ever had. Welcome to dramatic revenge. The morning after my conversation with Rebecca, I woke up to 7 missed calls, 3 text messages, and 1 voicemail. That was never a good sign in my family. The voicemail was from my mother. Emily, please call me. We need to talk about this before it gets out of hand. Whenever my mother said something was getting out of hand, what she usually meant was that someone had upset the family peace by refusing to tolerate bad behavior. I made coffee before calling her back. Experience had taught me that difficult conversations were easier with caffeine. She answered immediately. "Thank goodness," she said. "Your sister is devastated. Not angry. Not concerned. Not wondering whether her husband had crossed a line. Devastated." I sat down at the kitchen table. "Mom, Jason insulted my children. He didn't insult them. He literally suggested there was something wrong with them because they're adopted. He was expressing concern." I closed my eyes. There it was. The family translation system. Concern meant criticism. Honesty meant rudeness. Keeping the peace meant letting certain people say whatever they wanted while everyone else stayed quiet. "Mom," I said carefully, "if someone spent an entire dinner questioning your parenting, would you invite them to a celebration for your child?" Silence. Then a sigh. "That's different." "No, it isn't. It is because Jason is family." I almost laughed. Because that was exactly the problem. Family status had become a shield. Somehow, being related to someone meant they could behave badly without consequences. The conversation went nowhere. When I hung up, I felt exhausted. Not angry, just tired. Tired of defending children who had done absolutely nothing wrong. Tired of explaining why basic respect should not be optional. Tired of being expected to absorb every uncomfortable comment simply because it came from a relative. That afternoon, Logan wandered into the kitchen while I was cleaning up. "Mom." "Yeah. Is Aunt Rebecca coming to Madison's party?" The question caught me off guard. I looked at him. "Maybe." "Why?" He shrugged. "I was just wondering." Then he hesitated. Children always hesitate right before asking the question they're actually thinking about. "Does Uncle Jason not like us?" My heart sank. Immediately. Completely. Because that was the real issue. Not the birthday party. Not family drama. Not adult disagreements. The children noticed. Of course they noticed. Children always notice more than adults think. I put down the dish towel. "What makes you ask that?" Logan looked at the floor. "He never talks to us much." I didn't know what to say. Because he wasn't wrong. Jason had never been openly mean. But he had never been warm either. No enthusiasm. No interest. No effort. Just polite distance. The kind children can feel even when they can't explain it. I pulled him into a hug. "Listen to me." He looked up. "There is absolutely nothing wrong with you." His face softened slightly. "Okay. And there is nothing wrong with Madison." "Okay. And there is nothing wrong with our family." This time he smiled. A small smile. But enough. After he ran off, I stood alone in the kitchen for a long moment. Because suddenly my decision felt a lot less complicated. Jason's comments weren't happening in a vacuum. The children had already noticed something. Maybe not the words. Maybe not the opinions. But the attitude. And if an 8-year-old could feel it, then maybe I wasn't overreacting at all. Maybe I'd actually waited too long. That evening, Daniel came home from work and found me sitting on the porch. "You've got the thinking face," he said. I laughed. "The thinking face?" "Yeah, the face you make right before solving a problem." I told him about my conversation with Logan. Every word. Every question. Every feeling. Daniel listened quietly. Then he nodded. "You made the right decision." "I know. Then why are you still worried?" I stared out at the yard. Because I knew the answer. "I'm worried because I know what's coming next." Daniel followed my gaze. "What?" I sighed. My sister isn't going to let this go. And for the first time since all of this started, I realized something important. This was no longer about a birthday invitation. It had become a test. A test of whether my family respected my role as a mother. A test of whether boundaries would be honored. And a test of whether I was finally willing to stop being the person who always kept the peace at her own expense. What I didn't know was that Rebecca was already making phone calls. And by the end of the week, nearly everyone in the family would have an opinion about my decision. Some of those opinions were about to change the way I saw them forever. By Thursday, the birthday party itself had almost become secondary. The real event was apparently the family debate surrounding it. I learned this when my aunt called me before breakfast. "Emily, honey, can I ask what happened with Rebecca?" The moment she said it, I knew. Rebecca had been making calls. A lot of calls. I stirred my coffee slowly. "What version did you hear?" My aunt laughed softly. "The version where Jason made an innocent comment and you banned him from the family." "Of course. That version. The version where context mysteriously disappeared. The version where consequences became the offense and the original behavior somehow vanished. I spent 10 minutes explaining exactly what had happened. When I finished, my aunt was quiet. Then she said something that surprised me. "That wasn't concern, Emily." "No, that was judgment." "Thank you." After we hung up, I sat at the table thinking about that word. Judgment. Because that was exactly what it had been. Jason hadn't asked questions. He hadn't tried to understand. He hadn't shown curiosity. He had reached a conclusion about my children, and then presented it as fact. And somehow everyone was acting like I was supposed to welcome that into my home. By lunchtime, I had heard from 2 cousins, another aunt, and even an uncle I spoke to maybe twice a year. Apparently, my birthday party guest list had become community news. The funny thing was that nearly everyone asked the same question. What exactly did Jason say? And every time I told them, the response was remarkably similar. A long pause, followed by some variation of, "Yeah, that's not okay. That should have made me feel better." Instead, it made me realize something uncomfortable. A lot of people understood why I was upset. They just didn't want to say it publicly, because it was easier to pressure me than confront Rebecca. That afternoon, my father stopped by unexpectedly. He found me decorating cupcakes with Madison. Or rather, attempting to decorate cupcakes. Most of the frosting was ending up everywhere, except the cupcakes. Madison looked up excitedly. "Grandpa." My father smiled immediately. Unlike some people in the family, he had never treated the children as anything less than his grandchildren. He hugged both kids, admired their frosting disaster, and eventually joined me on the back porch while they ran off to play. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he sighed. "Your mother isn't handling this well." I laughed despite myself. That's one way to put it. He looked tired, older than usual, like he'd spent the last several days refereeing an argument he never wanted. "Rebecca called us 4 times yesterday." "4? 4?" I shook my head. Dad leaned forward. "You want to know what I think?" I nodded. "I think Jason was wrong. Simple. Direct. No qualifiers. No excuses. Just wrong." The relief I felt was larger than I expected. Not because I needed permission, but because someone was finally willing to say the obvious thing out loud. Dad continued. "If someone said that about my children, they wouldn't be invited either." I looked at him. "Really? Really?" The answer came so quickly there wasn't even room for doubt. Then he said something I hadn't considered. "Emily, this isn't actually about the birthday." "What do you mean?" He folded his hands together. Jason expected to say whatever he wanted without consequences. I stared at him, because suddenly the entire situation made sense. Jason wasn't angry about missing a party. Rebecca wasn't angry about one invitation. They were angry because for the first time, someone had drawn a line. A real line. One that couldn't be argued away. One that couldn't be guilt away. One that carried consequences. My father stood to leave. Before walking toward his car, he stopped. "You know what your problem is?" I raised an eyebrow. "This should be good." He smiled. "You spent your whole life being reasonable. That's a problem?" "Sometimes." Then his expression softened. Reasonable people often assume everyone else is operating in good faith. I watched him drive away afterward. And the more I thought about his words, the more uncomfortable I became. Because maybe Jason wasn't shocked by what happened. Maybe he simply believed I would eventually give in. After all, I usually did. I was the peacemaker, the compromise maker, the one who smoothed things over. The one who absorbed discomfort, so everyone else could stay comfortable. Maybe everyone expected me to fold eventually. Maybe that was why Rebecca seemed so confident. That night, my phone buzzed again. A text message. Not from Rebecca. Not from my mother. From someone I wasn't expecting. "Jason." The message was only one sentence. "I think you're blowing this way out of proportion." I stared at the screen. Read it twice. Then 3 times. Not an apology. Not a clarification. Not even an acknowledgement of what he'd said. Just another criticism. Another judgment. Another insistence that the real problem wasn't his behavior. It was my reaction to it. And in that moment, something inside me became perfectly clear. Jason still didn't understand why he wasn't invited. Which meant the situation was far from over. Because if there was one thing people hated more than boundaries, it was boundaries they couldn't talk their way around. And Jason was about to discover that I was no longer interested in negotiating mine. I didn't respond to Jason's text. Not immediately. A younger version of me would have. I would have spent an hour carefully crafting a reply. explaining my feelings, clarifying my position, trying to make him understand. But at 33, after years of marriage, motherhood, and navigating complicated family dynamics, I had learned something important. People who genuinely want to understand ask questions. People who don't want to understand argue. Jason wasn't confused. He knew exactly what he had said. The next morning, I showed the message to Daniel. He read it once and handed the phone back. Still doesn't get it. No. Or doesn't want to. That possibility sat heavily between us. Because there was a difference. One could be fixed. The other couldn't. The birthday party was now only 2 days away. The house was full of preparation. Gift bags lined the dining room table. Balloons waited in giant plastic bags. Madison had already changed her mind about the cake designed 3 separate times. The excitement in the house should have been contagious. Instead, a cloud seemed to hang over everything. Not because of the children. They were blissfully unaware of most of the drama. But because the adults refused to let it die. Around noon, my mother arrived unannounced. The moment I saw her car pull into the driveway, I knew exactly why she was there. Daniel saw it too. He glanced through the window and quietly said, "Good luck." I laughed. "I'll need it." Mom entered carrying a container of cookies. A peace offering, or what she hoped would be one. She sat at the kitchen table and immediately launched into the topic. "Rebecca is heartbroken." I took a deep breath. "Mom." "No, listen." I knew that tone. The one parents use when they're about to explain why your feelings should be set aside for someone else's comfort. "Families disagree sometimes," she continued. "People say things they don't mean." "Jason meant it." She frowned. "You don't know that." I almost laughed. "He said it twice." Mom looked away. For a moment, I thought maybe she finally understood. Maybe she was beginning to see why this mattered. Then she surprised me. "Couldn't you just let it go for one day?" There it was. The sentence I'd been expecting all week. Not because it solved anything. Because it was easier. Easier for me to absorb the hurt than for anyone else to confront the person who caused it. I folded my arms. Why am I the one who has to let it go? Mom blinked. "What? Why isn't Jason the one being asked to apologize?" Silence. A long silence. Long enough to answer the question. Because nobody had asked him. Not once. Not Rebecca. Not my mother. Not anyone. The entire family had focused on convincing me to lower my boundary rather than asking Jason to raise his behavior. That realization hit harder than I expected. Mom shifted uncomfortably. "You know how he is." And there it was. The sentence that explained years of family dynamics in 6 words. You know how he is. Translation. He's difficult. He's insensitive. He says hurtful things. But everyone has adjusted around him for so long that they expect everyone else to keep doing it. I leaned forward. "Mom, do you know what Logan asked me yesterday?" Her expression softened. "What?" He asked if Jason likes them. The color drained slightly from her face. I continued quietly. An 8-year-old noticed. She didn't answer. "He feels it, Mom." The kitchen suddenly felt very quiet. For the first time all week, my mother looked genuinely uncomfortable. Not defensive. Not argumentative. Uncomfortable. Because there was no easy response to that. Children don't analyze family politics. They don't debate social issues. They simply notice how people make them feel. And Logan had noticed. Eventually Mom spoke. "I didn't realize." "I know." The words came out softer than I intended. Because I believed her. I genuinely didn't think she'd realized. She'd been so focused on keeping peace between adults that she hadn't considered the children caught in the middle. For a moment, I thought we were finally making progress. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. "Rebecca." "Of course." Mom sighed. "She's really upset." And just like that, the moment vanished. Back to Rebecca. Back to Jason. Back to their feelings. I stood up slowly. "Mom." She looked at me. "If Jason walked through that door right now and said, 'I'm sorry. I was wrong. I shouldn't have said that,' this entire situation would be over." Her eyes widened slightly. Because she knew I was right. I wasn't demanding humiliation. I wasn't demanding punishment. I wasn't demanding perfection. Just accountability. A simple apology. The kind adults are supposed to give when they hurt someone. Mom left an hour later. The conversation hadn't solved anything, but it had revealed something important. Nobody in the family was actually fighting about the birthday party anymore. They were fighting about whether Jason should have to face consequences. And judging by everyone's reactions, that seemed to bother them far more than his original comments ever had. That evening, as I hung decorations with Madison, my phone rang again. This time it was Rebecca. I stared at the screen, watched it ring, then stop. A voicemail appeared seconds later. I didn't listen to it right away. I waited until the children were asleep. Then I pressed play. The message was only 40 seconds long. But by the time it ended, I realized tomorrow's birthday party was going to be far more complicated than I had imagined. Because Rebecca wasn't just angry anymore. She was making threats. And for the first time all week, I wondered how far she was willing to go. Scene 5. I listened to Rebecca's voicemail 3 times. The first time I was shocked. The second time I was angry. The third time I realized exactly what she was doing. Emily, her voice began, tight with frustration. If Jason isn't welcome, then neither am I. And honestly, if that's how you're treating family, maybe other people should know about it too. The message ended there. No direct threat. Nothing dramatic. Just enough pressure to make me uncomfortable. Just enough guilt to make me question myself. The problem was that Rebecca had known me my entire life. She knew exactly which buttons to push. For years, those tactics worked. Not this time. I deleted the voicemail and went upstairs. Daniel was already reading in bed. He looked up. How bad? I handed him the phone. After listening, he shook his head. That's not about Jason. No, that's about control. Exactly. Rebecca wasn't trying to solve a problem. She was trying to win. The next morning was Madison's birthday. And despite everything, the house woke up filled with excitement. Madison came running into our room before sunrise. It's my birthday. As if we'd somehow forgotten. As if she'd forgotten to remind us every hour for the past 2 weeks. For a few precious hours, family drama disappeared. There were pancakes, presents, laughter, children running through the house. Everything a birthday should be. And watching Madison smile reminded me why I had drawn the boundary in the first place. This day wasn't about adults. It wasn't about family politics. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about a little girl who deserved one day where she felt completely celebrated. Nothing else mattered. By noon, guests began arriving. Friends from school, parents, neighbors, aunts, uncles, cousins. Even my father arrived early carrying a giant stuffed animal that was nearly as large as Madison. Everyone seemed determined to focus on the children. Everyone except one person. My phone buzzed. Rebecca. Again. This time it was a text. Last chance. Just those 2 words. I stared at the screen, then locked my phone, and went back to helping 6-year-olds attack a birthday cake. Because some messages don't deserve a response. For most of the afternoon, everything was perfect. The children played games. The adults chatted. Madison received enough toys to fill a small warehouse. And for the first time all week, I felt myself relax. Maybe the worst was behind us. Maybe everyone had finally accepted my decision. I should have known better. Around 3 o'clock, my cousin Sarah approached me quietly. Emily. Something in her voice immediately made my stomach tighten. What is it? She glanced toward the front yard. You might want to come outside. I followed her. And there, standing near the driveway, was Rebecca. And beside her, Jason. My heart sank. Not because I was afraid. Because I couldn't believe they had actually done it. They knew he wasn't invited. They knew exactly why. And yet there they were. Standing outside my daughter's birthday party. Waiting. Almost daring me to do something. For a moment, I simply stared. Rebecca crossed her arms. Jason looked annoyed. As though he was the victim. As though someone had wronged him. I walked toward them calmly. What are you doing here? Rebecca looked genuinely surprised. We came for the party. No. What do you mean no? You know exactly what I mean. The tension was immediate. Several guests noticed. Conversations began slowing. People started watching. Rebecca stepped closer. You're seriously going to do this in front of everyone? I almost laughed. No. I wasn't the one who brought an uninvited guest to a child's birthday party. She was. You were told Jason wasn't invited. Rebecca's face hardened. You're embarrassing us. I looked around, then back at her. You embarrassed yourselves. Jason finally spoke. For the first time all day. This is ridiculous. I nodded. Showing up after being told not to? I agree. His jaw tightened. And suddenly I saw something I'd never noticed before. He genuinely believed the rules didn't apply to him. For most of the afternoon, everything was perfect. The children played games. The adults chatted. Madison received enough toys to fill a small warehouse. And for the first time all week, I felt myself relax. Maybe the worst was behind us. Maybe everyone had finally accepted my decision. I should have known better. Around 3 o'clock, my cousin Sarah approached me quietly. "Emily." Something in her voice immediately made my stomach tighten. "What is it?" She glanced toward the front yard. "You might want to come outside." I followed her. And there, standing near the driveway, was Rebecca. And beside her, Jason. My heart sank. Not because I was afraid, because I couldn't believe they had actually done it. They knew he wasn't invited. They knew exactly why. And yet there they were, standing outside my daughter's birthday party, waiting, almost daring me to do something. For a moment, I simply stared. Rebecca crossed her arms. Jason looked annoyed, as though he was the victim, as though someone had wronged him. I walked toward them calmly. "What are you doing here?" Rebecca looked genuinely surprised. "We came for the party." "No." "What do you mean no?" "You know exactly what I mean." The tension was immediate. Several guests noticed. Conversations began slowing. People started watching. Rebecca stepped closer. "You're seriously going to do this in front of everyone?" I almost laughed. No, I wasn't the one who brought an uninvited guest to a child's birthday party. She was. "You were told Jason wasn't invited." Rebecca's face hardened. "You're embarrassing us." I looked around, then back at her. "You embarrassed yourselves." Jason finally spoke. For the first time all day. "This is ridiculous." I nodded. "Showing up after being told not to?" "I agree." His jaw tightened. And suddenly I saw something I'd never noticed before. He genuinely believed the rules didn't apply to him. What happened next surprised everyone, including me. Jason started talking. And the more he talked, the worse things became. "This entire situation is ridiculous," he said loudly. I gave an opinion. An opinion. Not an insult. Not a judgment. An opinion. Several relatives exchanged looks. My father folded his arms. Nobody interrupted. Jason continued. "You've turned this into some kind of attack." "No," I replied calmly. "You did that yourself." His face reddened. "I never said anything bad about your children." The words hung in the air. Then something unexpected happened. My aunt spoke. "I was told exactly what you said." Jason turned. So it was bad." Silence. Then another relative spoke. Then another. One by one. People who had remained neutral all week suddenly weren't neutral anymore. Because now they were hearing him in real time. Watching him refuse accountability in real time. Watching him double down in real time. The same thing I'd been dealing with all week. And suddenly it wasn't just me saying it. The entire family could see it. Rebecca looked shocked, as though she'd expected everyone to support them. Instead, support was disappearing rapidly. Jason looked around, confused, frustrated, cornered by his own words. For the first time, I think he realized this wasn't about one invitation. It was about respect, and he had none left to spend. Eventually, my father stepped forward. The entire yard went quiet. My father wasn't a dramatic man, which meant when he spoke, people listened. "Jason." Jason looked at him. Dad's voice remained calm. "You owe Emily an apology." Simple, direct, undeniable. Jason stared at him, then laughed. Actually laughed. That was his mistake. Because the moment he laughed, any remaining sympathy vanished. People stopped seeing a misunderstood man. They started seeing exactly what I'd seen all week. A man who believed accountability was optional. Dad pointed toward the street. "Leave." Rebecca's eyes widened. "Dad." "No." The word landed like concrete. "Leave." Nobody argued. Nobody moved. For several seconds, the entire world felt frozen. Then Jason turned and walked away. Rebecca followed, furious, humiliated, still convinced she was somehow the victim. The moment their car disappeared down the street, a strange calm settled over the party, like a storm had finally passed. And for the first time all week, I could breathe. That evening, after the guests left, I sat on the back porch alone. The house was quiet. The children were exhausted. Daniel was cleaning up inside. The birthday was over. And somehow, despite everything, it had been wonderful. A small voice interrupted my thoughts. "Mom." I looked down. Madison stood in the doorway holding her new stuffed rabbit. "Yes, sweetheart." She climbed into my lap. Today was the best birthday ever. Just like that. Every argument, every text, every phone call, every ounce of stress. Gone. Because that was the entire point. Not winning. Not proving anything. Protecting this moment. Protecting her. I hugged her tightly and knew I would make the same decision 100 times over.